Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November edition of 100 Pictures of Honey reading series. We're so glad you're here with us this evening. If you are not muted, please mute yourself unless you are a reader. We want to be able to only hear our poets' voices tonight. I'm Donna Voyer, I'm your host, and again, thank you so much for being here this evening. I'm really excited for you to hear these three voices. There's our third reader coming right now. Yay. We have Dr. Stevie Edwards, we have LJ Sysko, and we have Matthew Thorburn, who I'll be reading from their newest books, as well as, I'm told, maybe some new poems as well, which is always exciting to hear new poems out in the world. So we are going to get started. We're going to be working in just in alphabetical order. I will be dropping the biographical information and the links to where to buy our poets' books in the chat at the beginning and end of their readings so that you can have that information. So we are going to begin tonight with Stevie Edwards. Looks like the link got stuck in the middle of your bio, but that's okay, it's there. I have been a fan of Stevie's work since her book Good Grief, which came out a while ago now, I don't remember what year, and her work as an editor at Muzzle. Hallmarks of her work are this honesty and craft for creating a voice that gets poems that get under your skin. A line that's always stayed with me from Good Grief, from a poem called Instructions for Grief. It's a stanza actually, is, "You can't be responsible for everyone's happiness. Repeat this until it sounds a little less like brake pads giving out to these months of slush and ice." And her new book, Quiet Armor, is no exception to poems that make me a fan. So I want you to be a fan as well. Stevie, the floor is yours.
All right, so I'm going to be reading from Quiet Armor today, which is my book that came out about a month ago. And it really started for me writing it around the 2016 election. I'm going to start with the title poem, which was kind of about how depressed I was right before the 2016 election, just in terms of as somebody with very bad PTSD, watching somebody be elected who bragged about grabbing women by the genitals was very triggering for me. And there are many other reasons I am not a huge Trump fan. I hope I'm okay in saying that. But anyways, this is called 5 Days Before the Election. 5 days before the election. And I don't want to feel the earth today because a rich man is in it who says he can grab the most mine thing I can imagine, but maybe wouldn't want to because maybe I am almost 30 and have grown stately in myself these last 3 years, watched ass and breasts become rounder world and said, okay, I can inhabit more cells, can be the earned sides of my grandmothers. And it is American to consider that he has the right to lead America, to gather the wrinkled hands of bankers and show them all the nooks and crannies, cloaking hushed treasures, teach them how to strip the quiet armor women don when we are tired of eyes following our legs up staircases. I want to lie down in a riverbed, to let the water rush over until I am a cold nothing, touched only in the urgent pity of rescue divers dragging me back to earth. I want to let a man, a stranger, worry over my body, what makes it tick and gasp. I want to name each thigh dimple and raised vein, each flake of dry skin and stubbled hair, lest someone think they were ownerless, run their hand up my skirt on a bus like it wasn't a valued thing thieved. I want to be precise about how rich I am, how bountiful my folds of skin, this museum of a pussy, this grand opera belly. Let the government erect a fence around my yards of legs, lush country of bush and blood. Let me be a closed border, a private club. And now I'm gonna read a poem where I curse a lot. So this is I wrote a series of poems that are called my drunk bitch poems, where I was trying to sort of interrogate my own relationship with alcohol and overuse of it in my 20s. And I made this drunk bitch character so that I could be a little both more honest and more creative than I could be without making up a character. So this is drunk bitch dreams of a luminous stream. Drunk bitch dreams of a luminous stream and pisses herself. Drunk bitch drops her drink in the lap of a slightly less drunk body and is sure she's found love in his smiling shrug. Easy, tiger. Drunk bitch finds love in the chest hair of a gyrating diplomat, but loses her keys and coat ticket while trying to find the beat. Drunk bitch's hips lie about her age and relationship status. Drunk bitch sees every park bench as a balance beam. Drunk bitch says she used to be a gymnast and isn't lying, but wasn't ever very good. Drunk bitch is limber but bruises easily. Drunk bitch has never broken a bone, but has broken 5 cell phones, 3 necklace clasps, and the hearts of a squadron of decent and indecent men. Drunk bitches stagger, summons lust from the loins of unimaginative men. Drunk bitch sips the future and burns the past. Drunk bitch ladles rum punch, spills red rumors across her blouse, and swears she's not drunk tonight, just clumsy. Rumor is, drunk bitch swallowed the salt of a man in the bar bathroom. Drunk bitch sloppy paints her toenails pink until she feels pretty enough to text old drunk lust. Drunk bitch is as drunk bitch does. Drunk bitch kisses like a vacuum mating with a wet sponge. These days, drunk bitch stretches her luck till it pulls. Drunk bitch causes a commotion, leaves a house party on a stretcher. Drunk bitch gets up to get drowned. Drunk bitch floods the life of the party and drunk bitch tears. Drunk bitch clicks her heels 3 times and wakes in a new home with no clothes or cab money. Drunk bitch watches strangers in their underwear make coffee, eggs, sometimes banana waffles. Drunk bitch still has this one good trick. She lies down like a corpse for 4 days with drawn drapes and groans, Lazarus, Lazarus. Drunk bitch is the resurrection and the splintered cross. That one's a mouthful. I'm going to read a poem called Some Things We Carried, and this is after Tim O'Brien, and it was inspired by thinking about all the random craft women and other people carrying their purses. And it was inspired by that, as well as all the intangible things we all carry around with us all the time, as well as the tangible. So this is called Some Things We Carried. We carried 28 days of pills and small plastic dials. We carried the dates of our last periods. We carried lipsticks and pressed powder compacts. Sometimes we carried keys to buildings we didn't live in anymore. Sometimes we carried mace and feared it'd be used against us. We carried smartphones that carried the news, the weather, maps, emergency contacts. Sometimes we carried each other. Sometimes we carried a woman, the wife of a young psychology professor, after she broke down in the cocktail bar over a parade of whiskey sours. Sometimes we carried her black eye. Always, we carried her rehearsed story, changing the kitchen light bulb at a late hour. Her foot slipped, head slammed against the corner of the counter. How she had to keep repeating it to friends and strangers. We carried how leaving was impossible. We carried how she was his student before she was his wife. We carried the scream of a woman in the college apartment complex, the sound of a lamp crashing against the wall, her ex-boyfriend on the rugby team who'd come back to claim her, the blood on her lips as we held her and waited for paramedics. We carried our mothers who carried us. We carried how they left until our fathers stopped drinking. We carried each other's pregnancy tests and Plan B and Monistat and CVS bags, hidden beneath things we didn't really need, like extra toothbrushes, deodorant, and iced tea. We carried the names of children we feared having. We carried tampons and Xanax and books of poems. We carried our youths. We carried the first men to pound fists against walls next to our head. We carried wanting to be wanted like that, like they'd break us if we weren't theirs. We carried fear each time we left. We carried our luckiness. We carried what we hadn't been charged to endure, our good teeth and bones still in place. We carried bar tabs and a series of credit cards. Sometimes we carried condoms and sometimes we carried risk. We carried each other home and said that was safer than not carrying each other home. Sometimes we carried the gentle taste of each other's mouths. Sometimes the carrying was so gentle. Let's see. I guess I'll probably have time to read two more. I'm gonna read a poem called Some Threads from a Depression, and then I will read something less depressing at the end. Some Threads from a Depression. Lately, the world only speaks to me like this, the slow failure to shove the thread through the eye of a needle, and each day a new mending pile. I made a promise I wanted to keep, to never speak to her, to leave my dead self swallowed in the heavy blue I swallowed. 4 years after suicide, everything I touch echoes her song, drown a little dream with me. Small tufts of her hair on the pillow, each dawn so familiar I could weep for the scent. Oh, isn't it true? All the world's lavender grows only for her. Maybe this is a love poem. Hasn't her belly pressed gently against my spine each night since I left her? Some nights I try on her clothes, the yoga pants I woke not wearing. The hospital replaced them with a backless gown and catheter. For a year, I wouldn't touch them, convinced the fabric smelled of death, but I didn't throw them away, honey. I know you've been here through times of rape and wasting, unknotting the world from my back. I don't know where this old thread leads either. Is each soft strand more offering or omen? I want to say something about the razor bites on my ankles. I want to say, God, get this bitch away from me. But this sob song suits me, bluest, water falling from a shower head, enough makeup to make a blue face smile, a vintage blue dress that twirls. Oh, how I know each stitch by heart. And I'll finish with a poem called Tapping Therapy, which is a special kind of therapy used for chronic pain issues. This one's still a little depressing, but at least I make jokes about myself. So tapping therapy. I Googled the word moo-moo, and I'm very sorry my life has come to this, desire for shapelessness. I am a blob of pain in the recliner this summer, my hip on fire, pleading for a river of opiates. And it gets worse. It would not be wrong to call today's sack dress a moo-moo. The doctor says to ice my ass 6 times a day until the bursitis calms. And Carol, my sweet psychologist friend, Skypes from Oregon to talk about the pain, about bad stories I've stored in my hip for too long. She tells me to tap my face and chest and say, I can love myself with the pain, with the stories. And I sob for my uncle's bad hip, his never enough opiates and alcohol, embalmed middle-aged corpse, my own young wildness, the overdose, paramedics who dropped my body like heavy groceries down a steep stairwell and gave me a new crooked gait. She says, I have wound shame into a small ball and stored it in my hip for years. And she is right. And my sobbing is right. But I don't know if the moo-moo is right, if it's a form of acceptance or quitting. My love comes home early from a party and asks what I am doing, why I am crying and touching my face. And I say, I'm busy doing a weird thing with Carol. He wouldn't understand her methods, would want something more scientific than this beautiful woman instructing me to tap my face and let the old stories close. Thank you all.
Thank you, Stevie. Highly recommend the book. Stevie didn't read these poems tonight, but the book also has a wonderful series of poems that talks about women in literature and in history that have had, the experiences that women have, and they blend beautifully with the more confessional poems. So I highly recommend Quiet Armor. Thank you, Stevie, for reading those poems for us. Our second reader is LJ Sysko, luckily who I met through this reading series, who is a delight, as is her work, which is very funny and very real, but also has these moments that are beautifully lyrical. One of my favorite lines is from a poem called Girl Icarus. It's sky meets sea in a line as thin as decision, as soft as lemon pith, as hard as falling. And there's a great interview in Tupelo Press Quarterly with LJ, where she talks about her book, which is called The Daughter of Man, which I'll be putting into the chat shortly, which started as was a project book, essentially. But I loved one of the things you had to say about working on a project book, and it was this: I can tell other poets this: a springboard conceit is indeed helpful until it turns into a stymieing contrivance. Let another better conceit appear. And I just think that's such good advice, because I think we've all worked on things where we get mired in what we said we were going to do rather than what the poems want to do. So I'm very excited to hear her read poems from this collection tonight. So LJ, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Donna. Can you hear me okay? It's a pleasure to have been invited to read with Stevie and Matthew, and for everybody who's here listening, thank you so much for taking the time out to do it. Even if you were required to be here for class, which is my hunch, and that's awesome. I used to be an English teacher, so I know. I'm actually going to start with two new poems. Everything I'm reading tonight, I've never read before, even if it's from the book. Yeah. So speaking of conceits, I thought I would create one for this reading. So the first poem is called The Names Alexa and Karen Are Dead. The names Alexa and Karen are dead, a 1950s futurist might have predicted. And if we checked the couples depicted cocktailing beneath Sputnik lamps in the subdivision brochure, we might have seen Alexa and Karen in the one furtive embrace of their summer, sharing ambrosia, frolicking al fresco, taking Sunday drives, cavorting between customer service desk visits and threats to sick police on innocents. Alexa, count the ways you love me. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding you right now. Please try again later. Thus, their season could not survive, devolving instead into an era of grievance. See Karen standing befuddled, glaring at Alexa like she can't find the automat coin slot. I want mayonnaise on crustless capitulation. I demand pimento loaf cut in deferent halves. I will permit a bowl of tapioca, cold, bloodless, compliance, fast. And Alexa, emotionally unavailable and more stoic than spiteful, a ghostly cashier behind glass, cracks her chewing gum and hands change back. So the next one's also new. And I think you'll probably surmise what you need to from the poem. When I saw the First Lady in a coat with "I don't care" painted on the back, I thought, of all the phrases to commit to broadcasting widely, I mean, planet Earth saw it and surmised she meant it. About them, it, us, all of the above. And she'd selected, suiting carefully to the purpose, one military green anorak. I could don a blazing orange frock with hot flash embroidered on the lining, puffy white like a burgeoning cumulonimbus, so that when shucked in a hurried huff, it rains upon the valley of my solar plexus, where I might graffiti beauty and truth, despite the unoriginal fact that Emerson came before and parroted Plato, who plundered Anonymous, usually a woman, Virginia Woolf correctly interjects. And I suppose if I took a tour of my farthest landmarks, spelunked deeper inside my ribs cathedral, whisked through Long's mountain pass and arrived at last to witness the wellspring, a ferned citadel, cool and burbling. I'd see there are no words at this site and zero guarantees it will remain so untrammeled. I might exhale an oh, or a parched and fevered sigh. A drink from my own source could reveal a rock blazoned with, I was here, in lichens, or fiddleheads fluttering all in a line, unfurling, uncurling. I survived. I survived. I survived. And the crowd quiets then beneath the falls, pooling and a swirl with the rhythm of life. When the day is done, I will turn to go with my hair wet from swimming, dripping on my ragged t-shirt, faded as evening light on the hike down to town. I'll pick my way along the path, each step drafting my silent advice. Dear, forget style. Start simply with a direct object. I care about something. Fill in the blank. Insert patience or love if inclined. Jot down fairness or hope if top of mind. Keep going, revising in time, but be careful not to blunder too far in your reverie and miss it. The turn for the clearing, where costumes don't matter, only the silly, squeaking little animal bowling forth blindly to bask for an hour. Thank you. So now on to poems from the Daughter of Man. This book has a cover that this subgenre is actually disrupted realism. So you can see that there's lots of realistic elements, but then it sort of pixelates and fractures into disruption. And I chose to read poems from the collection that are also disrupted and fractured, that take up different kind of space on the page, have lots of medial caesurae, and I do away with punctuation and grammar in a lot of places. So that's what you're going to hear next. This poem is called Plinko, which is a game from The Price is Right, involving a pegged board with a token that kind of pings down by chance and lands somewhere. And as we go, we kind of divide into two voices, two realities, really. Plinko. If I held our thermometer up against a light bulb or dropped it in my tea, I could stay home, 99.9, 100.3, and watch The Price is Right at 11 o'clock from the couch. Apprentice, my mother who narrowed her eyes, delivered cinnamon toast, delivered my pillow from upstairs to my nest while I mumbled prices, remarked on groceries I didn't realize were sponsors, watched models in Sorcel, me gesturing at automobiles like junior hags defeathering jumbo American fowl. Be-dum-da-da, Broyhill dining sets, be-dum-da-da, condensed soup, tang to the moon, tididi, contestant bounds on stage, spacesuit boots plants her feet a flag. She comes in with her coffee, stirring slowly, with a bid to check my head that unabashedly undercuts, remarks on how warm. Everyone else's bid, I feel $1, precisely as warm, too bad. As tea, the actual retail price is in that mug. Nice try, nice try. Smile as warm, exactly the temperature of luck dropping. This next poem is also about luck. It's called Luck or Something Other. And it was drafted in an effort to take a look at race-motivated police violence and even murder. And I'm running the experiment of approaching that topic from the inverse standpoint. So from a white, female, privileged point of view, what it is like to be approached accosted by authority, and routinely rescued. Luck or something other. The day I was rescued from not drowning by a Long Beach Island lifeguard, he crashed into the surf and grabbed me. I thrashed away because objectively I had been swimming, seized now, accosted by a blonde, tan, teenaged demigod. I was only 14 and wearing my practice Speedo for serious body surfing, even though my mom preferred me in a bikini. She'd say, flaunt it while you can, aim for separation from the pack, from his grasp, which he tightened instead, a vice squeezing me breathless about the ribs, lifting me bodily like a reeling marlin. I fought harder and yelled things like, stop, I don't need saving. I'm not drowning. His grip grew hysterical, and my mother, in her cover-up, despising of getting wet, came just so far to tideline, offered lukewarm rebuttal, winked at me for becoming a helpless spectacle, for staging a precocious pickup. Like a cat that mid-bite grows enamored of its own jaw's force, the lifeguard doubled his grip, growling, I got you. My whole body roiled with alarm. All this for swimming. Swimming, I thought. At least I imagined that's what I had been doing, but I could have seemed somehow other. She's a competitive swimmer, Mom intoned very fast as we jounced clear up the beach to dune grass where he put me down. There I transformed. For them. A monster. Begrudging, boiled red, ungrateful, embarrassed, winded, a haul, deposited beneath the lifeguard's panting valor. My mother snapped a picture of us together, then one, of just me, spent, arriving back into my own account. In this poem, every line is actually its own stanza. I once had a history teacher whose walls were ribboned with a timeline from one treaty to war, to treaty to war, with civilizations rising, falling, held firmly in line. It bothered me I'd never heard of most of them before, as though understanding ought to come species encoded. We made board games with trade routes, disease cards, and blight tokens. The advent of fire and iron precipitated good fortune or demise every time, but I loved the laminated surface. Rectilinear order where misfortune and boon were statistically predictable, and our group advanced quickly from prehistoric to bronze. Surprise attack from another sixth grade section did us in, but it was an epic upset that should never have happened. Our system of religion was matriarchal and ecologically rooted. Our republic fair and green. For years, Mr. Snyder displayed our game on his windowsill of fame. And the last poem is called General Accident, which will become clear in the poem itself. But I did want to say that I wrote this in response, or used as a springboard, Robert Frost's poem Design, which is the one involving the spider and the moth and the white heel-all, which is normally blue, and the question that he's asking about whether there can be a universal designer given such predation is the same question I'm asking, but maybe a little differently. General Accident. Come sit with me a spell and tell me good news. But if there's none, we'll speak as we usually do, of horrible things, of events out of control spun, of forces once controlled, now not. Devoid as reason, flying standby. In short, let us sit and do what we can do to admire the problem. A phrase from consulting, my first job at 22. Optimizing claims for insurance companies like, general accident. I sat in a dolorous conference room, windowless, bereft of contact unless a resentful adjuster poked in to watch me spinning his world with Excel, data, faxes. This was a different sitting, not a spell, and neither was the sitting in taxis, at gates on planes, for the flight back to Philly on Fridays. I was always pulling something behind me. Like a black bulb, my bag dragged a sack of venom, eggs, silk to stand by, wait with, wonder sometimes aloud that I had such spinning at my disposal, a gift gotten from seeming nowhere. Such turns of web, such phrase of turn, and I forced my horrible mouth to shape thanks to the flirty agent for the upgrade, for a spell from proportion, logic, until a horrible thing came crawling out, caught now, interposing as a fly buzzing, and we, it, and I talked then of nothing, whirring of wings of sky before we flew, fed on the sound of each other going. Gate after gate, treading, wrapping seatbelts around what we did do in DKNY black suits that came with a skirt and pants, but only one jacket cut for men, controlling who we were. Speak, sit, a spell. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So happy to hear you read from the book, but also share those new poems, which is always exciting to hear what people are working on outside of the books that they are reading from over and over again. So thank you so much for that. And again, I put the link for that, for your book in the chat, everybody, another book that you want to get. And our last reader this evening is Matthew Thorburn. His newest book is called String, which is, we were just talking about project books. It is a book that is a narrative, a narrative of a speaker who is a boy who is in the midst of and trying to escape a war, which, considering what's going on right now, seems really timely. And one of the things I really admire about Matthew's work is this intense attention, even though a lot of his poems don't use a lot of punctuation or capitalization, this intense attention to sound, to internal rhyme, to patterns of sound, to the way one word comes back and echoes in another word in a line. As an example, in his poem, The Boot, there is a section that reads, "We counted ragged soldiers stumbling across Schmidt's field, coatless, muddy, one bloodied." And you hear those sound echoes, but you also have counted, and then we have the number one coming at the end of a line. Just this real attention to every word that hits the page. And so I'm very much looking forward to hearing these poems read aloud. Thank you, Matthew, for being here, and welcome. And it is your screen.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. And Stevie and LJ, thank you for your poems. It was a pleasure to listen to your work. And thank you all for being here in the audience listening tonight. I am going to read some poems from, if you can see it blurred here, but this is String. There we go. This is my most recent book. Was published earlier this year. And like Donna was saying, it's a book-length poem. I'm starting to refer to it a little bit as like a novel in poems almost, but it's a book-length sequence that tells a story of a teenage boy who lives through a war and its aftermath. And he loses pretty much everyone and everything, but he survives to tell his story. And this book is sort of him looking back later in life and trying to sort of untangle what's happened to him and sort of the narrative of his life and make some sense of that. He's a sort of a person who's damaged in a lot of different ways. And so his voice is a little skittery. And like you mentioned, I don't use really hardly any punctuation or capitalization in this book, which was a new thing for me. I'm very much a punctuator. So I wanted to try to push myself to try that. And this is also a book that it was just published this year, but these poems I started writing in 2016 in what felt like a very dark time, and wanting to, in some ways, sort of get away from what was actually happening, sort of try to imagine this story, and to write something that was sort of like a fiction, a work of fiction in poems. But what I also found as I was writing it is that it's a book about a war, but it's also very much a book about family. It's a teenage boy who's the speaker of all the poems, and his mother and father are in the book, and his uncle and aunt and other friends and family. And those are the people that he loses. And so it ended up being very much a book about being a parent and being a child or a son. And in that respect, it ended up being very much, right out of my own experience. So it's hard to escape that, I guess. But I'm going to just read a few poems from the book. It's a book that starts kind of in the middle of things and then moves back to sort of describe some of the characters and then progresses. So this first poem is the first poem in the book, and it kind of just starts right in the middle of everything. And it's called Once. Once there was crusty bread, a last half loaf, a rind of cheese. My parents danced in the empty kitchen. They knew we would never come back. They didn't know. I listened in the dark. Brush and scuff of shoes, guttering candle. There was no moon. There was a broken oak, a silvery rain, pooling in the grass. Once in the tall grass, there was a tan captain, chest smooth, pants unbuttoned. His holster amazed him by being empty. Rosie groaned, spat, clutched her wrinkled pink dress, pointed the pistol between his eyes. Between the trees, I saw how everyone dies. But once I was a boy who talked in circles, talked in circles. I walked in the woods. There was nowhere I wouldn't follow her. I probably should have mentioned before I read that Rosie is sort of the hero of the book. She's a teenage girl who's in the town, a little bit older than David, who just before everything, just before the soldiers come and everything sort of starts happening, he meets and falls in love with. So she's sort of the hero of the story. This next poem introduces some of the other characters. It's called The Musicians, and it was sort of inspired by Pablo Picasso's painting Three Musicians. Uncle Albert laughed. He sat backwards on the piano stool. He reached back for a chord, a halting melody. Roger slipped in under the piano. He barked once, twice, his tail keeping time between Jean's feet. Jean with his scratched glasses, father's oldest friend. Jean with his limp that didn't matter now, his clarinet's starry night shine, its husky groan. Before one song could end, another began. First weary blues, then dead man blues, then stop time rag. Piano hands, mother called it. How Uncle Albert's moved, even on the couch, even drifting off, fingers shaping chords in his sleep. Father tapped the piano lid like a drum. Aunt Adelaide strummed her washboard with thimbled fingers. Mother sang Honeysuckle Rose. The best songs are fast songs, Uncle Albert said. They end too soon. Street lamp light slipped between the blinds. It fell in stripes, over their shoulders, over mine. Because I played too, my violin light as a bird under the bow. I was afraid to let go, so sure it would fly. And this next poem is another poem about Rosie and about David, who's the narrator. It's called The River's Song. I would sing you a sky of finger-smudged glass, spikes of wild asparagus in the wet ditch beside the road. Rosie, roll out the piano, please. The old white upright in need of a tune-up. The yellow elbow of the river in what's left of the light. The river that remembers and forgets. A bright blade of light glances off the trees. The trees glance back. A bright blade, the river that forgets and remembers, in what's left of the light. The yellow elbow of the river, the old white upright in need of a tune-up. Rosie, won't you please roll out the piano? Beside the wet ditch, beside the road, spikes of wild asparagus, a sky of finger-smudged glass. I will sing you. And this next poem is about the soldiers who come to their town and what they do. It's called They. They like to throw things. A man down a well, a woman through a window. They like to know things, names and dates, your hopes, what hurt, my hiding place, the combination to Saltzman's empty safe. They like to break things, doors, bicycles, legs and backs and necks. They like to take things, money, gold rings, fingernails, and fathers. They had no need for her, none for me, except they were hungry, so hungry and so angry. Like shadows, they like to hide behind my back. They like to ride behind my eyelids. Death was their dark horse. They never stood still. One of the challenges for me in writing this book is that it's just by virtue of what the story is about, it's quite a dark book, and especially for me, I'm more inclined to write poems with some humor in them and some levity. So I tried to get a little of that in here in sort of fleeting moments and to include that love story that, you know, what it's like to be a teenager. You know, whatever else is happening in the world, if you're in love, you know, you're in love. So there's just little glimmers of that here and there, I hope. But this poem, I think, has a tiny bit of that, and it's called The Magician. The white rabbit popping out of a hat I loved best, so plump its sleepy stillness. And the bright rings that were linked, then not, then clinked together again. Like Rosie's hand, like mine, held tight, then let go, the colored scarves. Red after blue after green, a wave, a rope, like magic, the way they made me forget. The bomb-splintered tree out back, its branches scattered in a halo. There was time for one last trick. The turbaned magician, his skinny assistant in her sparkly mask. Smile, a finger snap, and poof. They made themselves vanish, him and her, both at once. No one left to say, ta-da. I squeezed Rosie's hand, heard her mother cough. In that darkness, I thought of grandfather, deaf in one ear. His left hand, mother would say, just didn't work anymore. Too tired. I thought of his heavy walking stick, the newspaper folded on his chair. How it did not disappear for a year. It was the day he died. And I'm going to end with two other poems in the book. These come a little bit later. These are two poems about David's mother. This first one is called Wouldn't Hold. Everything is made of loops, made of long lines, mother said, and it began to unravel. The string of the world running out of my pencil. She taught me to hold on. Fingers' pressure against wood could blur lead to shadow, show the slow darkening, a candle's flicker making strange angles of her face. She said it all fades, is lost to the horizon. She snuffed the flame and I was falling. I tried to slide inside my letters. P's open window, the low doorway of an H. But how could I know? Words wouldn't hold me. How could I know they close so tight? And this last poem, one of the sort of threads of this narrative is that as things are happening and things are getting worse, is that David's family is trying to decide, his parents, should we stay or go, or kind of what are we going to do? And if we want to get out of here, how are we going to do it? And so this poem is kind of once they've decided to try to make a run for it and to catch a train out of town. And I wanted to end with this poem because it actually, I realized actually it sort of happens either a little bit before or after that first poem, where the parents know that they will never come back. So this is called Couldn't Let Go. How could we stay or go or wait and go later? Could we run, jump a train, pray for fog to drift over us instead of bombs? The bridge stopped now, halfway across the river, as if it changed its mind. The church gone, Schmidt's barn gone, rocks in the well, salt in the fields, and Rosie. A cat picked at something bloody in a puddle. Mother buttoned my coat. She said, David. She looked at me. She said, David. That was Father's name, too. She gripped his arm. There was something she needed to go back for. What couldn't she let go? She didn't say. I'll never know. I'll meet you there, she said. We'll take the train, she said. He said, Angela, please. Kiss me, she said. Don't say goodbye. Thanks so much.
Wow, thank you so much. These poems were just beautiful. All of your work was wonderful. Thank you so much to all three of our readers for being here. Thank you to our audience for being here. Please, if you can afford to buy the books, buy the books. If you can't afford to buy the books, please check out the work of these poets online. There's plenty there for you to see. And I hope that we will see you in December for our December reading, which will feature Katie Manning, Phil Memmer, Jordi Alonso, and Ariana Benson to end out 2023. I am going to stop the recording. Thank you so much to all of you for being here. And if you have to leave us, good night. If you want to stick around and ask a question or say hello, please feel free to do that as well. And thank you very much for coming.